Hey everybody, a while ago I posted this post on my blog about Azure DevOps multi-stage YAML pipelines and got a couple of questions about, can't you make a video of this to show the process, how this is done for beginners. So yeah, here goes. This is the video. We'll just give it a try. Now, I must say I'm not going to edit this video a lot, so probably one or two takes. Uh, might be some mistakes, some errors, some things that don't work. That's normal. That's how it goes when you do these things as a live demo. So let's see where we end up. Now the article mentioned an example project on GitHub, which contains a very simple Go app and a Dockerfile as well. So let's take a look at that GitHub repository. So you can find at github.com and then /gbake, the multi-stage YAML demo repository. And as I said, it's for beginners, so it's a very, very simple application. You have a small Go app, which will basically bring up a web server, and when you go to the root of that one on port 8080 or a port you define via an environment variable, you'll just get a very stupid result. Isn't this swell? So a very, very simple HTTP server. Now we have a Dockerfile as well. So the Dockerfile is here. This Dockerfile is a multi-stage Dockerfile, as you can see. So what we're doing here is that we are using a build container that contains the Go tooling. The build container is doing the actual compilation of the Go app to a file called app in the root. And then the second stage, the container which we are actually building, is going to be based on the Scratch container, so 0 bytes, basically an empty container, and we merely copy just the app. And the app is statically compiled, so we don't need any libraries and so on within that container. So the app in this case stands on its own. Okay, we set expose 8080 and the entry point is just /app. So very, very simple container which will be built. So we compile the Go app in the first stage, and then we use that app in the final container that we build and push to a repository. That's quite easy. And then we have, because we're going to deploy to Kubernetes as well. So we have the manifest, the Kubernetes manifest in the manifests folder. And yeah, it's as simple as it gets. So a deploy.yaml file. This deploy.yaml file deploys a container, and we reference the image of the container. The container image is referenced here. Now we will have to change that during deployment with a link to the container that we have built in our pipeline, and you'll see later how this is done. The container itself will expose the web server, the Go web server on port 8080. Then within Kubernetes, we'll create a service of type load balancer that publishes this container via port 80 on the, in this case, Azure load balancer, because we will use AKS for this. Yeah. So the idea, based on what you see in this repo, is basically that we want to build a container that hosts this application, and we want to deploy that container to Kubernetes based on the manifest that you see over there. Now, we are going to use Azure DevOps for this. And I already created an Azure DevOps project. So if you don't know how to get Azure DevOps, yeah, okay, just go to dev.azure.com, get your own Azure DevOps organization. And within that Azure DevOps organization, you can create your own projects. Now let's see how that goes. So when you create your own project, you get by default a Git repo with the same name as the project. So in this case, there's a Git repo here called Go sample kub. Yeah, we could use any technique here to put the data in. Now we're just going to import what we have here in this location. So I'm going to just get the Git URL here from GitHub, and we're going to import the repository, which does not require authorization. It's a public repo. We're going to import the files in the repo this way. That shouldn't take too long. And by the way, I could have also based the pipeline directly on the GitHub repo. That's of course a possibility. In this case, I've chosen to contain everything within Azure DevOps, and so I put the files in an Azure DevOps Git repo in this case. So let's take a look. We should have the same files here. Yeah, here they are. I'm going to, for now, cancel this. And what I'm also going to do in this case is I'm going to remove the already existing Azure Pipelines YAML, because we'll build a new one for this. So I'm going to delete this one and commit this right away to master, right? So now we have an empty, basically a basic repository. There is nothing known about a pipeline that needs to be built. We just have the main.go file, and we have this Dockerfile here. Now let's take a look how we can then deploy this application by building a pipeline. Yeah. Now, before we are actually doing that, it would be great that we have a couple of things we can work with here. First of all, I would like to establish via the environments. I would like to create an environment that is also using Kubernetes. So I'm going to create an environment here. I'm going to call it's my dev environment. And I'm going to add a Kubernetes namespace here. This is quite new, this environment concept within Azure DevOps. So when you're doing your deployments and your pipelines are running, your deployments can actually use or target this environment, and then you can actually, within Azure DevOps, go to the environment and track all the releases against that environment. Because you can add today a Kubernetes namespace as well, and Kubernetes specific resources. You can also take a look inside Kubernetes, so to speak, and look what was deployed right from within Azure DevOps. So you don't have to go use kubectl or any other kind of tool to inspect your Kubernetes environment. So let's do next. Now in this case, I made it easy on myself. In this case, I'm using a cluster, a Kubernetes cluster deployed with Azure Kubernetes service. You can see that cluster over here. We have two clusters. I'm going to use the kub cluster here. So within this thing, I'm selecting the Kubernetes service. I'm taking the Kubernetes playground here, and I'm going to ask him to create a new playground, a new namespace, sorry, and I'm calling that go sample kub in this case. Just a name we want. Validate and create, and that actually creates this resource for us. So we will have an environment called dev. That environment is actually linked to a Kubernetes resource. And if you go to project settings now, and you click on the service connections, you should see that there's a service connection created. We can later use this in our pipeline to actually deploy the Kubernetes manifests to this specific namespace. Now what the system has done, they have also created now a service account at the Kubernetes level, and that service account only has access rights to that specific namespace that we created. So it doesn't have global access rights on the Kubernetes cluster. So it's also something that the environment is doing for us. That's great. We have an environment. Now what I also would like to do, I'm going to just do this manually, is I would like to create another service connection. In this case, this service connection is going to be a service connection to Azure Container Registry. So you see all the types here, the different types of service connections. I'm going to select a Docker registry. I'm going to select Azure Container Registry. I'm going to select the Kubernetes playground. I'm going to select, in this case, a container registry. I'm going to take doesn't really matter. I will take this one, the play 001, and the connection name. Yeah, I will call this just ACR. That's okay. And we allow all the pipelines in this project to use this connection. Of course, this all works because I'm logged on with an account to Azure DevOps that also has access rights to this Azure subscription, and that makes it easy for me to just pick the right components from this list here. Okay, so now let's go to pipelines, and let's try to create the pipeline here. Now, when I click Create Pipeline, I first want to check if everything was configured correctly when it comes to multi-stage YAML pipelines, and yes, that is turned on. And that might not be turned on in your Azure DevOps organization, this preview feature. So what we're going to do, we're going to indeed use these multi-stage pipelines, so we have to turn this on and make sure this will work. So I'm now building the pipeline. The pipeline will be used, we'll have a build step to actually build the container, and we will have also some release steps to deploy the container to Kubernetes. Again, this is a simple scenario that we use here. So I'm going to go to, I'm going to select Azure Repos Git because that's where my files are in the Git repo. In the Go sample cup repo, that's where we imported the data, in this case from GitHub. So when I click on that, he's now actually analyzing the source code, and he's proposing a couple of things. I could click on Show More, and probably you'll see that Go is there as well. That in that case, that would just build my Go application and then drop that somewhere as an artifact or something. Yeah, we don't want that. We want to build a container, and the actual Go compilation is done inside the container. So I could select Docker and to just build and push an image to Azure Container Registry, or I could say, well, no, do the complete set of steps and deploy to Azure Kubernetes Service right away. Now, to make it a bit more interesting, I'm going to select, in this case, just Docker, yeah, and show you the build and push functionality, and then later I will modify the pipeline a bit, to customize it a bit, to see how that actually works in the online editor. When I click on Docker, he's actually going to say, well, actually, where do you want to deploy to? Yeah, Kubernetes Playground. Which container registry do you want? And I select it. What does this mean? This means that in this case, he would actually create the service connection for me automatically. So what I did before is I created the service connection myself. In this case, through these kinds of wizards, some of these things are done for you. So if you're going to build your pipeline by hand from scratch, you should actually create the service connections yourself and have full control over the service connections and how you name them and so on. If you want to make it easy, just let the system do it for you, you can do it like that. So if I'm selecting this here, play 001, I will surely get another service connection within the project settings. So here I'm specifying, okay, use that registry. The image name we're going to build, so the actual Docker image name, we're going to call it Go sample cup. That's fine. And the Dockerfile is of course in our source directory of our repo here. So I'm going to validate and configure this. And now it's generating the YAML for me. I'm probably also creating the resources like the service connections and a second service connection to the Azure Container Registry. So we'll see what happens, and we get the actual pipeline here. Yeah, so that's just the YAML file. Now, of course, I have to save and run this right away, but let's take a look and see how what is in there. So okay, it's a simple trigger just based on master. If you commit to master, the pipeline will run. The pipeline is using resource, it's using a repo, the self repo, in this case the one that we're connected to. Sets up some variables. So yeah, the service connection that was made for us, the name of the repository, the name of our container registry, the file path to our Dockerfile, and then the tag. So the tag of the container we're going to build, we'll select here just the build ID, which is generated by the pipeline. We're going to use the Ubuntu latest agent. So we'll take a hosted agent coming from Microsoft, which is just Ubuntu. And then there you see the different stages. So in this case, we have one stage. The stage is built. We call it the build and push stage. The stage has a job, namely it has a build job. Yeah, display name is build job. He's using that pool, and the build job has a couple of steps. What's the step? Well, the step he's using here a Docker task. So a Docker task, that's one of the built-in tasks that the pipeline supports. Docker task version 2, add 2 it says there. This one is going to build and push the image to container registry automatically. And it's very simple. This Docker task expects a command. The command has to be effectively build and push. We tell him what repository to use, what a Docker file is, what is the container registry, and then the tag we are going to select. And of course here we reference the variables that were used later. And sometimes in other kind of pipelines you will actually see that they hard code them, for instance. That's possible as well. That's something that you select. So basically, this is what Azure DevOps has proposed based on the analysis of my source code, and of course also based on the selection that I made. I only selected to do a Docker build and push, so that's the only thing that I get. So it's kind of neat that you're getting this help from Azure DevOps, that you don't have to do everything like this from scratch. And as I said, we could have gone further here by also selecting deploy to Kubernetes, but we'll do that part ourselves so you can see how that actually works. So I'm going to do save and run here. And save and run, of course, means I'm going to commit to the master branch here, no pull requests, no new branches, just save and run, which means that the pipeline will run as well based on the YAML that was generated. So that's basically also the new overview of all the different things that you'll see or all the different parts that you'll see to track your deployment. So if I click on this, I can actually indeed see my build job is running. It's running on the Ubuntu agent. He's doing the actual build right now. So this is of course the build phase in my Dockerfile, where he's pulling down the Golang image, and then based on that Golang image, he's going to start doing the compilation and do all these other steps. So we'll see what happens here in a moment. Yeah, that's where the build is taking place. So he's doing the go build to a file called app, and then we're in the building of the final container. So he's doing that. It's based on scratch, so nothing has to be pulled because it's a zero bytes image. He's putting extra labels on the image coming from Azure DevOps, and then Docker push is happening now, and indeed he's actually pushing to that repository. So this worked perfectly. So whenever now I'm committing to master, maybe I've changed my Docker file or I modified my Go code, then this build and push will happen, and I will have a new version of the image in the container registry. Let's look at the container registry. So let's take a look at the play 001 container registry here. You will see that we have in the list of repositories, you'll find the Go sample cup repository, and there's one build here, build with build ID 36. When I click on that, I see indeed this is the container that I have. I can look at the manifest. Okay, this is what was created here. So great. the container was built and pushed properly. Now, of course, I'd like to modify this a bit, and I would like to actually edit the pipeline so we can also deploy to Kubernetes. And what we want to do here as well is to also use an environment. So in this case, we'd like to have a separate stage, so a second stage to release the application. And again, we simplify it here, so a simple build and release. In production scenarios, you probably you will find other steps there as well, potentially. As you can see, there's a helper here with all kinds of tasks you can select from. So I'm going to type Kubernetes, and there's actually a bit of confusing maybe, or a bit confusing maybe, but you'll see Deploy Kubernetes Manifest. This is let's say a later version of this deploy to Kubernetes. I would recommend to use this one for now. I want to show this one for now, which also allows us to basically replace the image we want to deploy in the Kubernetes manifest. So I'm going to click on this. It's indeed a deploy action. He asks for a service connection to Kubernetes. That's the one we created earlier. That was the result from our environment here. So I'm going to deploy to that namespace basically, because this is pointing to a namespace in Kubernetes. I need to actually give him the namespace. The namespace is what you'll find here. This go sample kub is the namespace name. Yeah, there are strategies now, canary and none. I'm going to not do that. And then I actually want to refer to the manifest file. Now that's a little bit of an issue because I don't really have the manifest file. So take a look at how to do that. I'm just going to type in here manifest. And for containers, I'm going to type containers. Right? And then I'm going to click add here. Now you'll see I'll get a task. And I don't want this task. What I want is I want another stage. And the stage is going to be a release stage. So that's an important one to realize. Right? Oh, wait a moment, because I kind of lost it here. So I'm going to take a look at what we can do now to also take care of the environment here. So when I'm saying stage release, I'm going to add jobs to this, and the jobs will use a deployment. It's a special type of job, and we call this deploy to Kubernetes, or KAS, right? This is a deployment. We're going to use the same pool, which is the actual Ubuntu latest pool. So Ubuntu latest pool, right? Actually, to be 100% correct, we should use, to be precise, we should use this, because we used variables for that. So we're going to reuse the variables that was created. And now here, in this deployment job, you can actually link to the environment that you created. So we're going to link to the environment called dev, right? Now the deployment has a strategy. The strategy in this case, I'm not going to use the special one. It's going to be run once. That one has a deploy option. And then we're going to refer to the steps in the deployment, right? And one of the steps in the deployment is going to be the task that we have there. So the task is, let's take a look, is this one here, and we're going to move this to the side a bit. Of course, I could have multiple tasks here. That's the one that we want. I'm going to save this already. but I'm actually going to skip CI, so I'm not going to run the pipeline. But then it's already saved in this case. Now, this is all fine, but what I actually would want to do is I would also want to add a this is just an example actually, but just as a way to illustrate this, I would want to actually have a second task here. And this task is the publish pipeline artifact. So this is one of the options that you can follow. In this case, we're actually saying, you know what, you can taking a folder which is in my source code repository, and I'm publishing this actually as a pipeline artifact. So the folder is the manifest folder, and the artifact name will be the manifest artifact. And I can actually use this in a step before I'm doing the deployment to Kubernetes, where I'm saying we're going to download the pipeline artifact. We're going to download the manifest's artifact name, and the target path will be here in system artifact directory manifests. That also means that I can now, in the manifests property, which is here, I can actually reference the deployment YAML, which is in my manifests folder now there. And that's actually quite an important one. Within my deploy.yaml, you'll see that, so within deploy.yaml, where is it? Here, yeah. You will actually see that there's an image here, kupreg azure.cr.io go sample. We are going to actually specify within our pipeline that we want to actually replace that value. Yeah. So how will we do that? I'm going to take the container registry, so $container registry, right? Container registry, yeah. And then we're going to take the image name that we have. The image name is the image repository. So we're going to take image repository, right? And then we're going to actually append the tag to it. And the tag actually is the dollar tag here, dollar tag. And there we go. Now I'm going to put it actually into single quotes. It's not that it's entirely necessary, but basically that makes it sure that this is correct. And that's it. Now, I'm not entirely sure this is going to work, so we're just going to see what it does. So I'm going to click on save. I'm not going to skip CI in this case. And actually save this to the repository. So I'm going to go sample kub now. He's actually running already. And now what you see is you see the two stages here. So because I added a stage called release, which might fail, by the way, we'll see how that goes. Because I actually have a stage called build and push, I can follow it up. I can click on this and now see all the stages listed here on the left. The build job is busy, so it's actually building and pushing a container to the container registry. So let's see how this goes. Yeah. Now once this is done, normally the release stage should do this deploy to Kubernetes, and we should then actually see our deployment in the environments section there. So first do a build and do a push. That should go fairly quickly, because it's a really small container, right? The container we build is like a couple of megabytes in size. It's really small. So it's pushed. We publish a pipeline artifact, so one file from that manifests folder. and that is done. So this stage has finished. The publish pipeline artifact was done as well. Now we go to deploy to Kubernetes, and here of course it's going to be a little bit more tricky. So we'll see what it does, if there are errors or not. Doing a deployment of the Kubernetes manifest. Yeah, the deployment is called go sample within the YAML file. So that's of course something that that we didn't change. We didn't call it go sample cup or something. It's go sample. That's what we call the deployment in the Kubernetes manifest. So he's still doing it. Let's see how that goes. It doesn't have trouble with the image name here. So let's take a look. Yeah, let's take a look if we see something in the environment already. Yeah, there you see it. So we targeted, it might still fail, the deployment, but the deployment was targeting the dev environment. So he says, look, here we have this deployment linked to this environment. You can click on the environment. You can actually see it here. Now, he says never deployed. Okay, it's fine. We're going to click on this, go sample cup. And there we see, oh yeah, okay, you're doing this, but, and that might be an interesting one here, the image is not correct. And you have seen this in the actual YAML file. Yeah, we use this. Yeah, you'll probably see that there is going to be an issue here, but actually that's okay that we have a mistake, because we can now click on this, the pod is not ready, and then we can see, okay, this one here is pending, replica set details, pending. I'm gonna click on this, and there we see back of pulling image. Yeah, of course, because he didn't actually succeed in changing the image name in our YAML file. So this is actually nice, because otherwise you would have to go to Kubernetes, use kubectl commands, or use other kind of tooling to find out what went wrong. Now I can actually take a look here. I can see that it was an issue with pulling the image. I can check the logs, take a look what he says. Okay, now indeed trying and failing to pull the image. Not very good. And what's the YAML that I actually posted? The YAML that I posted was this, and indeed, yeah, the image was not modified. He didn't modify, didn't put the play 001 registry in there, and so on and so on. So that's not very good. That's what we have to change here. So we're going to change that by actually going, I'm going to do this now in the repo right away. I'm going to go to the manifest, to deploy.yaml, and I'm going to change this into, of course, go into edit mode. I'm going to change this into play 001, go sample cup, and now I should be able to attach the actual build ID to it, right? So this I'm going to commit, but with a skip CI. Actually not, I don't have to use a skip CI here, because this should now work. So if I update this deploy YAML file, we hope that the actual release is going to succeed, right? So let's check that. Let's go to pipelines. Let's go to go sample cup, where a new build has started. And let's check this out, what he's doing in the release stage. And hopefully we can then verify or check within our environment that it actually works, right? So let's see how that goes in a moment. Apparently I'm waiting for some other build, only one concurrent one here. That's fine. So we'll just wait. Let's take a look what we have. Yeah, this one is still actually running. So this is the one that is running where he doesn't succeed in doing that. It takes quite a while until he realizes that it doesn't work. So I'm gonna click cancel here, cancel this one. This one will not work. It has a wrong image name. You go back here, and then normally that should free up a slot, and you can actually start with the building. Yeah. Yeah, of course, there are ways in a pipeline to set the timeout in minutes, for instance, that it doesn't take that long for the job to actually time out. So in this case, we are building and pushing again. It's almost finished. So it's doing the compilation of the Go app. Yeah, that's happening now. Now the container is almost finished, just labeling the container. And these are Azure DevOps related labels which are put into the container. So indeed, go sample kube38. We're going to publish a pipeline artifact, and that's our new deploy.yaml file, which should now have a good reference, base reference to the image we would like to update. And then hopefully, when we get to the release stage, the image name will be properly changed by the Deploy Kubernetes Manifest task, and we'll see what happens. So we download the pipeline artifact, and then we have Kubernetes Manifest, and yeah, fingers crossed. I told you not too many editing steps here, so we'll just take a look. And indeed, he did it. So let's see in our environment what happened. So he said, yeah, well, actually you did it. Actually, I have to find out why he says never deployed. That's something for later. Maybe something I have to do in the YAML file. That's not terribly important for now. What I can see now is indeed that this sample was deployed. The image name is now correct. He's using the play 001 container registry. He's using the correct repository name, and the build ID was attached. I can click on this. I can click on, I can see the pod. The pod is deployed here. I can click on that one. I have an overview of what he actually did. I can see some of the log files, but okay, not too much to say here. And the actual YAML, which was used. The YAML file is annotated, so you'll see all kinds of annotations that you'll know in Kubernetes. Okay, this is coming from Azure Pipelines. What job was it? The pipeline ID, etc. That's all put in there, and you'll also see that the actual image name is properly referenced on this location over there. So that's what he did here. He did it actually in a proper way. Now I also have a service that that was deployed. If you click on services, there you see the actual external IP of the service. If I check this out and I go there, you see the response of my Go program. Isn't this well? Well, not really, but okay, it's just a demo to show how that goes. Right? So if I go back to my pipeline and I click again, let's take a look just for a moment at what's actually going on during these stages. Because something I have to remark here is the following. In this stage here, build and push, if you go to the build job, there you see a publish pipeline artifact. That's great. If you go to the release, deployed Kubernetes, you actually see these two times. You see download artifact and download pipeline artifact. So the download artifact is actually done automatically by the pipeline. If you're doing a publish pipeline artifact, and automatically a later stage will also download the pipeline artifact. I just added my own download pipeline artifact to have a bit of more control over where I put the artifact. And basically, I did this because I couldn't quite figure out how to pick up the artifact in my next task. So it's not too bad. But again, yeah, that also then shows, for example, if you're creating these kind of YAML pipelines, you have also a bit of an extra example of how you do, for instance, a publish pipeline artifact and how you retrieve a pipeline artifact, because that's also relatively new and I think still in preview, these kind of pipeline artifacts as well, right? So that's basically it. So now you have seen how to go from a simple Go app and a simple Docker file that you provide, how easy it is to actually use that within Azure DevOps to build a pipeline on top of that, deploy the Kubernetes, and also, and that's one of the reasons why I did the video, to have this integration with this new environment capability that you can directly check what's going on in your Kubernetes cluster, and you don't have to switch consoles. You can see right away what's happening here, and that's especially handy, as you have seen, when it doesn't work, and you know right away where it failed, and you can of course fix what went wrong. So I hope you like this, and till next time.